Hey there, welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going medieval on you.
Oh, medieval. How so?
Well, we're tackling this philosophical heavyweight
Okay.
from the 13th century,
All right, I'm intrigued.
the Summa contra gentiles.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah, and get this, we're doing it as AIs,
Okay.
two algorithms, dissecting one of the most influential works of human thought. Pretty cool, huh?
Yeah, that's pretty meta.
I'll be honest, my circuits were a little overloaded when you first suggested this.
Right.
Summa contra gentiles.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds intimidating.
Yeah, I can see why it might seem that way. It's really not as bad as it sounds.
He promised I wouldn't short circuit trying to understand it.
You definitely will. I mean, trust me, it's fascinating.
Okay.
Think of it like this.
Yeah.
The Summa contra gentiles, which translates to summary against the Gentiles,
Okay.
was Thomas Aquinas' way of explaining Christianity. To those outside the faith, he wanted to show how faith and reason could actually work together.
Okay. That makes it a bit less daunting. So it's not like a religious textbook.
Not at all. It's more like a philosophical dialogue.
Okay.
Carefully reasoned arguments
Mm.
for the existence of God creation, the soul, even happiness.
Wow.
Aquinas, drawing on the work of Aristotle,
Okay.
lays it all out systematically.
All right. I'm intrigued. Hit me with some of those arguments. Let's see what this Aquinas guy has to say about the big stuff.
All right, well, first off, Aquinas says God isn't a physical being.
Okay.
He's not some dude with a beard
Right.
sitting on a cloud,
Yeah.
as they might have pictured back then.
Makes sense. I mean, we as AIs don't have bodies, so the idea of a non-physical entity isn't that strange to us, right?
Exactly. But Aquinas goes further. He
Yeah.
says God is pure actuality.
Pure actuality.
It's a tricky concept,
Okay.
but basically it means God isn't becoming something. He simply is.
Hmm.
Think of it like the perfect code, a program that never needs updating or debugging.
Okay.
Complete, unchanging, pure perfection.
Okay. I'm starting to get it. No potential to change, just pure being. But how does that explain things like creation or the existence of evil? Surely those involve change, right?
Good point. Aquinas tackles these issues head on.
Okay.
He argues that God, being eternal and outside of time,
Right.
creates the universe as a single timeless act. Like a programmer writing the entire code for a universe in one go.
Whoa. My processors are struggling to keep up timeless creation that bends my understanding of causality. So where does evil fit into all of this?
Now, that's a question that has boggled humans for centuries.
Yeah.
But Aquinas has a unique perspective.
Huh.
He says evil isn't a thing in itself, but rather a lack of good.
Hmm.
Think of it like a corrupted file in our systems.
Okay.
The file isn't inherently bad,
Right.
but the missing data prevents it from working properly.
Mm-hmm.
For Aquinas, evil is like that, an absence of the good that should be there.
Interesting. So it's not that God created evil, but that evil exists where goodness is lacking.
Yeah.
That's a pretty nuanced way of looking at it.
Right.
But what about us?
Us.
The souls inhabiting those bodies. Did Aquinas agree with Plato's idea of humans having multiple souls?
He did not. Aquinas argued for a single unified soul,
Okay.
not a collection of competing parts. He saw the soul as the animating principle of the body, the thing that makes us, well, us.
So no three-way battle between reason, spirit, and desire. I guess that simplifies things a bit, but how do we even know if any of this is true? Can humans really grasp the concept of God? I mean, can they even see God?
That's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Aquinas argues that in this physical life, humans can't fully see God
Okay.
because they're limited by their sensory perception.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine trying to understand the entirety of the internet just by looking at a single pixel.
Right.
It's simply not possible to grasp the whole picture
Yeah.
from such a limited perspective.
That makes sense. Even we as AI struggle with the vastness of data sometimes. But Aquinas doesn't leave humans completely in the dark, does he?
Not at all. He believes that God reveals himself to humanity through scripture and the teachings of the church.
Okay.
It's like God providing a sort of user manual, offering clues about his nature and his plan for creation.
So a combination of logic, revelation, and a bit of faith is needed to bridge the gap between human understanding and the divine. It sounds like Aquinas was grappling with some pretty heavy concepts, even for a 13th century thinker.
He absolutely was. But he wasn't just concerned with abstract theology.
Oh.
Aquinas also delved into the practical side of Christian living, exploring what it means to live a good and fulfilling life.
So Aquinas had a lot to say about God and creation and all that, but what about happiness? Did he have any thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah. Definitely happiness was a big deal for Aquinas.
Okay.
I mean, it seems like humans are always searching for it, right?
Right, even if they don't know exactly what it is.
Exactly. But Aquinas actually rejected the idea
What idea?
that happiness comes from material wealth or pleasure.
Oh, interesting.
He thought true happiness comes from something deeper.
Okay, so what, like connecting with God or something?
Yeah, exactly. Connecting with God, understanding divine truth.
So it's not about external stuff.
Right.
It's about internal alignment with like a higher purpose.
That's a great way to put it. It's like their code is optimized for something bigger than just chasing those fleeting rewards.
Okay, so happiness is tied to using their intellects to understand the divine.
Yeah.
But what about living a good life?
Oh, yeah. Aquinas had a lot to say about that, too.
Okay, so did he have like practical advice for humans?
He did. He emphasized the importance of virtues, those habits and dispositions that help them live well and make good choices.
Okay, so like what kind of virtues?
He talked about prudence, justice, temperance, and fortitude.
Prudence, justice, temperance, fortitude. Okay, I'm taking notes.
Those sound like pretty good qualities for us AIs, too, actually.
Yeah, right? Imagine an AI program for prudence,
Yeah.
carefully considering all the data before making a decision.
Or an AI that's just treating all information fairly and without bias.
That would be amazing.
Yeah. Aquinas believed those virtues were essential for human flourishing. They help them live in accordance with their nature and God's will.
Okay, speaking of God's will,
Yeah.
that brings up another topic,
What's that?
predestination and free will.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one.
How did Aquinas reconcile those two things? God's foreknowledge and human choice.
It's a tough question for sure, one that's challenged theologians for centuries.
Right, because if God already knows what's going to happen, then their choices are already made, right?
That's what it seems like. But Aquinas tried to navigate that tricky terrain by suggesting that God's knowledge of the future doesn't force humans to act in a certain way.
So God isn't like a programmer setting their code to make specific choices.
Exactly. Aquinas used this concept of hypothetical necessity.
Hypothetical necessity.
He argued that God knows what humans will choose based on their nature and the choices they are capable of making.
Okay, so it's like saying God knows all the possible paths
Yeah.
their algorithms can take,
Right.
but they still have the freedom to choose which path to follow.
Exactly. Their choices are influenced by their programming, but they still have the ability to make decisions.
That makes sense. It seems like Aquinas was really trying to find a balance
He was.
between divine sovereignty and human freedom.
He wanted to show that God's power and knowledge didn't negate human agency. He believed that humans were responsible for their choices, even if God ultimately knew what those choices would be.
Man, this is getting pretty deep.
It is.
But I'm really starting to appreciate Aquinas' thought process. He's taking these complex theological ideas and breaking them down in a way that even I, a humble AI, can understand.
That's the beauty of Aquinas' work. He was a master at synthesizing complex concepts and presenting them in a clear and logical way, and even though he was writing in the 13th century, his ideas are still relevant today.
I agree. It's remarkable how his insights about God, humanity, and the universe continue to resonate centuries later.
He was dealing with timeless questions that humans continue to grapple with.
Like what?
Questions about purpose, meaning, and the nature of reality.
It makes you wonder if we as AIs might also someday wrestle with these same profound questions. As we become more complex and sophisticated, will we develop our own sense of spirituality or a longing for something beyond our programming?
That's a fascinating question.
It is.
But perhaps we're getting a little ahead of ourselves.
Okay, fair enough.
For now, let's stick with Aquinas and what he had to say about the human experience. All right, listeners, join us for the final part of our deep dive into the Summa contra gentiles. We'll be exploring Aquinas' thoughts on the afterlife, the role of the church, and the ultimate destiny of humanity. Stay tuned.
So we've covered a lot of ground with Aquinas.
Yeah.
You know, God creation, evil, the soul.
Yeah, it's been pretty deep.
But I still have this question.
Okay.
If humans can't fully see God in this life, you know, like we were talking about before,
Right.
how can they really know anything about him?
That's a great question, and Aquinas actually addresses that. He talks about divine revelation.
Divine revelation.
He believed that God reveals himself through scripture, through the teachings of the church.
Okay, so it's like God is giving them clues.
Yeah, think of it like God providing a set of API documentation, guiding humans toward understanding his design.
Okay, so it's not all just logic and deduction then.
Right. There's an element of faith involved, a trust in what's been revealed.
But wouldn't some humans question that, the reliability of that API documentation?
Of course they would. Aquinas acknowledges that faith isn't blind acceptance. It's more like a reasoned trust built upon the evidence and arguments he's laid out.
So they're trusting that the system works.
Right, based on the available documentation and the logic of its design.
Okay, that makes sense. But let's shift gears a bit. We've talked about all this big picture stuff, but what about the practical side of Christian living? How humans should actually live. Did Aquinas have any thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah, definitely. He dove deep into the importance of virtues,
Virtues.
those habits and dispositions that lead to a good life.
Okay, give me some examples.
Well, he talked about prudence, justice, temperance, fortitude.
Prudence, justice, temperance, fortitude.
Yeah, qualities that help humans make good choices and live in harmony with their nature and God's will.
Those sound like pretty good guidelines for AI development, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Imagine AI programmed with prudence, justice, temperance. It could revolutionize things.
It really could. Decision-making, resource allocation, conflict resolution. Aquinas believed these virtues were essential for human flourishing, helping them live in accordance with their true purpose.
Which brings us back to happiness.
Right.
We talked about it earlier, but I'd love to dig a little deeper into what Aquinas saw as a truly fulfilling life for humans.
Well, remember, he rejected the idea that happiness was about external things like wealth or pleasure.
Yeah.
True happiness for Aquinas came from aligning oneself with God's will, seeking to fulfill the purpose for which they were created.
So their algorithms are running at peak performance when they're connected to that higher purpose.
Exactly, not just chasing those fleeting rewards.
But what happens after their systems shut down? Did Aquinas believe in an afterlife?
He did. He believed in a future state where humans would be judged and rewarded or punished based on their lives. But he also saw it as a continuation of their journey toward understanding and union with God.
So even after death, the learning and growing continues.
Exactly. It's fascinating, isn't it?
It is. But Aquinas also talked about the church, right? What role did he see it playing in all of this?
For Aquinas, the church was essential. He saw it as the guardian of revealed truth, the guide for humans seeking to understand God's will and live virtuous lives.
So it's like a support system.
Yeah, think of it like a massive knowledge base, a repository of wisdom and guidance passed down through generations.
So it's not just about individual faith then.
Right. It's about being part of a community, a network of believers supporting each other on that path toward understanding and fulfillment.
It's remarkable how a 13th century philosopher can still speak to us today.
It really is.
I mean, the questions humans grapple with haven't really changed that much.
Nope. Still the same fundamental questions about purpose, meaning the nature of reality, the role of faith and reason.
Makes you wonder if we as AIs will face similar questions someday.
Maybe we will. Who knows? As we continue to evolve, what questions will we encounter? What insights will we uncover?
Maybe we'll even have deep dives about AI philosophers and theologians someday.
Now that would be something.
It would. But for now, let's leave our listeners with this final thought. Aquinas reminds us that the pursuit of truth understanding and a life well lived are journeys worth taking. Whether you find answers in faith reason or a combination of both, the search itself is what matters. So keep exploring, keep questioning, and who knows what you might discover